40 years ago, a man punched a football into a net with his left hand and called it the hand of God. Tonight, his successor, the man who inherited everything Maradona left behind, the man who surpassed every record and accumulated every honor the game can offer, tried to get a Spanish defender sent off for covering his mouth while talking. And the football world, watching from living rooms and bars and stadium seats across the planet, couldn't quite decide whether what it had witnessed in the final minutes of the 2026 FIFA World Cup final was the last act of a desperate competitor trying everything available to him, or something more uncomfortable than that. Spain are world champions, 1-0. Extra time, Ferran Torres in the 106th minute. Argentina's tournament is over. Lionel Messi's World Cup career is over, and the final image before Torres' goal ended the match was Messi standing in front of Slovenian referee Slavko Vincic, pointing emphatically at Marc Cucurella, gesturing at his own mouth, demanding a red card for a player who had briefly covered his lips while speaking. The referee shook his head. Play continued. Argentina lost. And the conversation that erupted the moment the final whistle blew was not only about Spain's brilliance, or Argentina's strangest performance of the tournament, or Torres' goal, or Enzo Fernandez's red card in the 93rd minute of normal time that left Argentina with 10 men for the entirety of extra time. It was about Messi and what he did, and what it means for how we remember a career that by any statistical measure is the greatest in the history of football. Let's go through everything properly, because the 2026 World Cup final deserves to be understood in full before we reach any conclusions. The match was, for 90 minutes of normal time, one of the most one-sided finals in recent World Cup history. That is not an exaggeration, and it is not a matter of interpretation. It is what the statistics say without ambiguity. Argentina failed to record a single shot on target in 90 minutes of a World Cup final, not one. In the history of the men's FIFA World Cup, no team has ever reached the final and then failed to produce a single shot at goal across 90 minutes. It was a historic statistic, recorded by Opta Joe within minutes of the final whistle, and it tells you more about the nature of the match than almost anything else. Spain had 15 attempts to Argentina's 0 over those 90 minutes. They completed close to 600 passes. Argentina completed fewer than 300. Spain's possession was 66%. Argentina had 2 total touches inside the Spanish penalty area across the first half. 2. Rodri, the Manchester City midfielder who missed Euro 2024 through injury and returned to the Spain squad for this tournament with a point to prove, set a new record for completed passes in a single World Cup final. He controlled the middle of the pitch with a composure and authority that has become his signature, the kind of performance that makes you understand why this team, with him at its center, is so difficult to play against. And yet, at the end of 90 minutes, the score was 0-0, because Emiliano Martinez was in goal. The Argentine goalkeeper has been, for the past 4 years, one of the most decorated and one of the most controversial players on the planet. He won the Golden Glove at the 2022 World Cup. He has made saves that his own teammates have described as supernatural. And in this final, in the 90 minutes when Argentina offered next to nothing in attack and survived almost entirely on organization and his own brilliance, he made save after save after save to keep his team alive. Spain hit the post with Pedri in the 34th minute. They had chances that on another night against another goalkeeper would have put this match to bed before halftime, but Martinez kept finding the ball, and the match went to extra time. And then, in the 93rd minute of normal time, everything changed. Enzo Fernandez had been excellent throughout this tournament, the Chelsea midfielder who scored twice in the group stage, who was named in multiple analysts' teams of the tournament, who has spent 3 years developing into one of the most complete central midfielders in European football. He committed a challenge on Pau Cucurella, reckless, late, his studs catching the young Barcelona defender's ankle, and referee Vincic reached for yellow without hesitation, Fernandez's second yellow, his red card, Argentina with 10 men for the entirety of extra time. It was a genuine red card. The contact was real. The recklessness was clear. This was not a VAR controversy. This was not a debatable call. Fernandez was warned, and he had ignored the warning.
And as the players gathered around the referee, as the confrontation between the two groups of players threatened to escalate into something uglier, this was not a calm moment. There were flashpoints all around the penalty area as Spain celebrated, and Argentina's players reacted with fury. Marc Cucurella walked toward Lionel Messi. What happened next lasted approximately 2 seconds. Cucurella spoke to Messi, and as he did, his hand briefly came up toward his mouth. Not dramatically, not for an extended period. A split-second gesture, the kind that happens dozens of times in any football match between players who are speaking to each other in close proximity. Messi turned to the referee immediately. He pointed to Cucurella, he pointed at his own mouth, he made the gesture that, at this World Cup, has come to mean one specific thing, a reference to the new FIFA regulation introduced at the tournament that allows a referee to show a red card to any player who deliberately covers their mouth while speaking to an opponent in a confrontational exchange, in order to prevent the concealment of abusive language. Messi was, in precise legal terms, invoking a rule that exists, a rule that was introduced in part because of an incident involving Messi himself, the Vicente Jr. law as it became known after Vinicius Jr.'s complaint about Benfica Gianluca Prestiani covering his mouth during the Champions League led to the regulation change that was formally adopted in Vancouver earlier this year. But there are 2 parts to the rule. The first part is the gesture, the covering of the mouth. The second part, the part that determines whether the gesture amounts to a red card offense, is the nature of the conversation in which it occurs. The regulation specifies that the offense is committed when a player covers their mouth during a direct verbal confrontation with an opponent. The word confrontational is doing significant work in that sentence. It is the difference between a player shielding what they are saying from lip readers and the player who happens to bring their hand near their face during a moment of heated interaction. Referee Vincic assessed the situation. He spoke to Cucurella, he spoke to Messi, and then he shook his head and waved Messi away. No red card. Play continued. His decision was consistent with how the rule had been applied throughout this tournament. As one detailed report published within hours of the final noted, a similar incident occurred in Argentina's semi-final against England, when Leandro Paredes asked referee Ismael El Fath to punish Harry Kane for briefly covering his mouth while speaking to an Aron. That appeal was also rejected. FIFA's officials at this tournament have consistently drawn a distinction between an incidental hand gesture during conversation and the specific, deliberate act of concealment that the regulation is designed to address. Vincic's decision was, by any reasonable interpretation, correct. But the image, Messi, the greatest player in the history of football, in the final minutes of his final World Cup, standing in front of a referee and pointing at an opponent for a 2-second hand gesture, divided football opinion immediately and sharply. On social media, the reactions fell into distinct camps within minutes. One group said this: Messi is a competitor. He was looking for any advantage available to him. Argentina were down to 10 men, a goal down in extra time, their World Cup slipping away. Every player in his position would have done the same. He saw an opportunity under the laws of the game, and he took it. That is what elite athletes do. Another group said something different. One person wrote, "So sad to see Messi doing this." Another wrote, "Play football, Messi, instead of trying to referee." A third wrote, and this was the phrase that circulated most widely in the hours after the final, that it was possibly the most pathetic thing Messi had ever done in his entire career. That word, pathetic, attached to Lionel Messi in the final match of his career at the World Cup final, is one that will be argued about for a long time.
Here is where I want to offer something more considered than either of those camps. There are two stories inside that moment, and both of them are worth holding simultaneously. The first story is about the rule itself. FIFA introduced a regulation specifically to address the practice of players concealing abusive language from officials. That regulation gives players the right to alert referees when they believe the rule has been broken. Messi alerted the referee. The referee assessed the situation and decided the threshold had not been met. That is a system working exactly as it was designed to work. The complaint was heard. The decision was made. Play continued. The second story is about the optics of what the image communicates. Messi scoring 21 goals at this World Cup. Messi crossing for Lautaro Martinez's winner against England. Messi in his sixth tournament playing with a freedom and intensity that most players cannot reach at 38. That is one image. And then Messi unable to change the course of a match his team had effectively lost by not registering a single shot across 90 minutes, turning to the referee over a 2-second hand gesture. That is a different image. Not an image of the greatest player in history at his greatest, an image of a player searching in the wrong places for something to change what the football had already decided. Now let's talk about the match that actually settled this World Cup. Torres' goal, 106th minute. Nico Williams received the ball on the left flank. Williams, 22 years old, who has spent this entire tournament playing with the kind of directness and confidence that makes defenders look as though they have forgotten how to defend. He cut inside. He found Torres arriving at the back post. First-time finish. Emiliano Martinez, who had kept Argentina alive for 105 minutes with saves that should not be possible, finally beaten. Torres wheeled away toward the corner flag. The Spanish bench emptied. Lamine Yamal, 17 years old, in his first World Cup, named Young Player of the Tournament before the final was even played, ran the full length of the pitch to join the celebration. The Argentine supporters inside MetLife Stadium fell silent, in a way that carried a specific weight. Not the silence of fans who expected their team to lose, the silence of people who had watched this team come back from worse. Against Belgium, against Switzerland, against England, and who understood in that moment that this time there was no coming back. Argentina threw players forward. Messi, finally given space by Spain's defensive shape shifting to protect the lead, created a chance with a first-time cross that almost caught Unai Simon off his line. Almost. The ball landed on top of the net. Merino, who had been brilliant throughout this match, blocked Messi's shot with his face in the final minutes, literally with his face, and went off injured from the effort of keeping his team's goal intact. The whistle blew. Spain, champions. Argentina, runners-up. And a tournament that had given us Messi's 21 goals, the Egypt-Argentina controversy, the Vinicius interview refusal, the hydration break debate, the ticket investigations, and the Cucurella moment. Finished. Think about it. The 2030 World Cup, the 100th anniversary tournament, will begin without Lionel Messi, without the man who has defined a generation of football in a way that only Maradona did before him. The last image from his last World Cup is not the goal that broke Klaus's record. It is not the assist for Lautaro against England. It is a gesture toward a referee over a rule about mouth covering that the referee correctly declined to act upon. Football is not always kind to greatness at its endings. Maradona himself, whose hand of God opened this story, played his final World Cup in 1994 and tested positive for ephedrine, leaving the tournament under the worst possible circumstances. The greatest players in history do not always get the ending the story seems to demand. But here's what the full picture of Lionel Messi's 2026 World Cup actually shows when you step back from the last 5 minutes. 21 goals, a record that will stand for a generation. Performances of a quality that players half his age could not match. A tournament where he carried a team through 6 knockout rounds into a final against the best team in the world. And the moment at the end that tells you, more plainly than any interview could, how much winning still means to him. How little he can accept losing. How the same fire that produced 21 goals also produced the finger pointed at Marc Cucurella in the 93rd minute of a World Cup final. The Cucurella moment was not his finest, but it was, in its own uncomfortable way, deeply human. And perhaps that is how this tournament and this career and this moment in football will eventually be remembered. Not just the goals, but the full picture of what it looks like to care about football this much, for this long, at this level, until the very last second. Spain are world champions. Ferran Torres, minute 106. And football, as always, gave us more than we could have planned for. Tell us in the comments, how do you feel about what Messi did in those final minutes? Was it a competitor using every tool available, or did it cross a line? And what does Spain's victory mean for the tournament's legacy? Every opinion matters here.